We've just experienced the largest tax rate in the UK, and most people didn't even realize it. Labour recently unveiled their updated autumn budget, and while it might seem somewhat unexciting on the surface, its implications for you are far more significant than you might imagine. I'll be breaking down the new taxes introduced, the planned spending, and my overall assessment of their impact on the economy and us as property investors. My biggest takeaway from the announcement was a profound frustration with the government's approach. They seemed intent on deflecting blame, pointing fingers at everyone else from reform groups to the Green Party. It's disheartening to see the very individuals we elect to power engaging in what feels like an absolute joke. This behavior, more than the policies themselves, left a strong impression. I rarely share political views because, frankly, I find most politicians equally incompetent. This budget announcement, particularly the communication style, only reinforced that belief. Let's dive into the two biggest changes, which many might overlook or even perceive as positive. The first is an enormous tax grab, projected to reach £8 billion annually by 2030, achieved through the freezing of tax bands. To give you a quick primer on how taxes work, the first roughly £12,500 you earn is tax-free. Earnings between £12,500 and approximately £50,000 are taxed at 20%, and anything above that is taxed at 40%. The core issue with freezing tax bands lies in inflation. Inflation erodes the value of your money over time. A pound tomorrow is worth less than a pound today. Typically, as your pay increases due to promotions, added value, or simply inflationary pressures, tax bands should also rise in line with inflation. Governments sometimes freeze these bands to collect more tax and contribute to the economy, but it is incredibly rare for them to do so back-to-back as they have now. This means those thresholds will remain unchanged for almost an entire decade. If you don't grasp the intricate economics, simply understand this. If nothing changes, we will collectively pay £8 billion more in tax each year. And this crucial point was glossed over in a mere 7 seconds. The next significant change, which might draw some criticism, is the increase in the minimum wage, especially for younger generations. Speaking purely as a business owner, and this is just my opinion, all things being equal, I would not hire a 17-year-old over a 25-year-old. It's not a matter of personal preference, but rather a higher perceived risk. Younger individuals often lack significant work experience, particularly in an office environment. The likelihood of a 16 to 20-year-old starting an office job and leaving within the first 12 months is considerably high. So, given identical skills, you're more likely to hire the 25-year-old, 29. Now, why does increasing their minimum wage make things worse for them? You might think more money is better, but not necessarily. Someone earning, say, £8 an hour isn't going to suddenly move out and live independently. They'll likely still be living at home with a bit of extra pocket money. The real problem is that they've become significantly less desirable for businesses to hire. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the reality. For white-collar or skilled office work, businesses will be less inclined to target younger individuals. Instead, minimum wage-focused hiring will be concentrated in sectors like hospitality, manufacturing, and industrial roles. This means young people are being denied exposure to growth and career opportunities that require intellectual engagement rather than manual labor. I'm not disparaging any career path, but stifling opportunities for intellectual development is detrimental. My alternative proposal: why not offer tax-free advantages for 16 to 21-year-olds? Imagine if they paid no tax at all. That's a novel idea that wouldn't drastically impact the overall tax burden, but would make them far more desirable and cost-effective for employers. Instead, they've been made less appealing. Another major change and one that particularly frustrates me because it impacts tax planners the most, concerns pension contributions. Pensions were already less than ideal for many, but now they've been made even less attractive. The annual allowance for pension contributions has been capped at £2,000. One might argue this is beneficial for working-class individuals who might not contribute more than £2,000 anyway. However, a substantial number of people, especially those whose employers match contributions, will be affected. If you've made the conscious decision to salary sacrifice a strategy of deferred gratification, choosing to forego some income today to secure your future, you will now be taxed for that decision. You are capped at £2,000, and any amount above that will incur national insurance contributions. This is quite clever, because I anticipate that when the finer print emerges, both the employee and the employer will be taxed on these contributions. Well done, labor. The middle class also faces increased pressure through dividend tax, which is set to rise by 2%. For company owners, paying oneself through dividends has historically been slightly more tax efficient than through PAYE. However, that gap has now narrowed, further squeezing owner-operators of small and medium-sized businesses. Then there's the electric vehicle, EV, charging tax, which I find particularly amusing. My business partner, for example, recently acquired a hybrid vehicle specifically for tax efficiency. Now, they've introduced a 3 pence per mile charge. What truly frustrates me about this, though it doesn't personally affect me, is the hypocrisy. The government heavily incentivized green energy and encouraged people to buy hybrid and electric cars with grants, only to now tax them once widespread adoption has occurred. It's as if it was designed this way, as if they planned this move all along. The tourism tax, charging £2 per night for hotel stays, isn't a bad idea, to be fair. Many European countries already implement similar taxes, and the UK is a highly popular tourist destination. I don't believe a £2 daily charge will deter visitors, so I see that as a reasonably smart move. The mansion tax is an interesting one. Homes valued over £2 million will incur a £2,500 annual tax, rising to £7,500 for properties over £5 million. This is predicted to generate between £400 and £450 million. The problem, however, is twofold. Firstly, outside of London, very few people own homes valued above £2 million or £5 million. This tax impacts an extremely small percentage of the population, specifically the super rich, who, if you haven't realized, often don't even register their assets in the UK anyway. Ownership and tax residency are highly movable, so it's quite a foolish policy, and £400 million a year isn't a significant sum for a national budget. Honestly, I don't think this will bother many people or have a widespread impact. The irony, and this is the most crucial takeaway, is that we are entering a decade characterized by high taxes and low growth. And who is being squeezed the most? The working class. This truly baffles me. If I had to rank the groups most impacted by this budget, the working class would be number one, particularly those earning between £30,000 and £60,000. Number two would be small business owners, not the large corporations generating 20, 30, or 40 million pounds annually, but those with turnovers between £500,000 and £5 million. If you own a restaurant, a pub, or operate in the hospitality or industrial sectors, you're in an incredibly difficult position. We must think beyond these immediate measures. Well done, Rachel Reeves. It wasn't the most dramatic budget. Quite boring, in fact, apart from the predictable political debates. But the irony lies in Labour's consistent claim to be for the working class. It seems more like they are supporting a very small minority who may not be actively contributing to society, which I will elaborate on shortly. So, Where is this money being spent? This is where things get contentious. Firstly, the two-child benefit cap. While I morally agree that children should not suffer for the decisions of adults, the reality is that adults make these decisions. Just like children, we are shaped by positive and negative reinforcement. If you make it even more beneficial not to work and to build a family, you risk creating a systemic profile of individuals who become financially dependent on society rather than contributing to it. I do, however, support the idea of removing the two-child benefit cap if the parents are working. If they had said, hey, for working parents, no matter how many kids you have, you will be supported because you are making a positive contribution, I would wholeheartedly agree. I can hear people asking, what if I physically can't work? While I sympathize with those genuinely unable to work, I'm skeptical that this represents a vast portion of the population capable of having children. If it is a widespread issue, then it should be verifiable. This policy alone is costing £3 billion a year. I was raised in a council house with 5 of us, and I still firmly believe that if you cannot afford to have children, then you shouldn't. And if you find yourself in that situation due to the cost of living, then getting a job and contributing is essential. Regarding the extra NHS budget, I'm conflicted. I admire the NHS and what it stands for, and I feel for the majority of its workers. However, the problem isn't a lack of funding. It's incredibly poor leadership. It's like having a bucket with no bottom. And the issue isn't the workers, it's the senior management who keep pouring billions of liters of water into it, only to exclaim, "Oh my God, we have a deficit here." Of course you do. Why not get a new bucket and fix the underlying problem? You cannot pour from an empty cup, which is essentially our current situation. The issue with the NHS isn't the budget allocated, but the misappropriation of funds. It's absolutely ridiculous. We should implement fines for people who consistently miss appointments, which cost the NHS £2 billion a year, and establish metrics to measure impact and effectiveness. Pay staff properly for the work they do, and then you'll attract better leadership. But as it stands, I find the situation absurd. On the upside, welfare. It's an interesting concept because welfare is good in theory. It's a nice buzzword for supporting working people. But the reality is often different. Increasing it to £9 billion a year, an additional $9 billion by the end of the decade, is absolutely ridiculous. So, what's my opinion on the impact? There are some interesting points, especially for investors. In the short term, 1 to 2 years, I foresee a significant squeeze. This will primarily affect the working class through the tax freezes, dividend taxes, and pension changes. That's where we'll see the biggest impact. I anticipate a slow growth economy. In the medium term, 3 to 5 years, one positive aspect for labor is that they have instilled some confidence in foreign investors. I haven't checked the current value of the pound, but I expected a more dramatic drop against other currencies. I believe it will remain relatively stable, perhaps even rising slightly. There seems to be a recognition that the UK is in a challenging position and needs smart, strategic investment. This aspect I actually appreciate. The problem, however, is that we are now at an average of 38% tax versus GDP, the highest the UK has ever experienced. High-tax countries, like those in Scandinavia, can thrive if productivity is also high. But in the UK, productivity has actually decreased, so it doesn't quite work. It's like a 5-star hotel that was designated 5-star 30 years ago, but hasn't undergone any refurbishment since. I believe this will have a significant impact, adding considerable pressure, particularly on the hospitality sector. Ironically, the very people they claim to help are the ones who get hurt the most. Now, for investors, ISAs are a crucial point. There was only a brief mention, but the £20,000 annual limit remains, which is a minor annoyance for those of us who want to contribute more. The significant change is the move to steer behavioral patterns. The government rightly pointed out that someone who started investing in a stocks and shares ISA 10 years ago would have approximately £50,000 more than someone who opted for a cash ISA. As I constantly say on this channel, you cannot save your way to financial freedom, and it seems the government has finally recognized this. To incentivize investment in stocks and shares, they've reduced the amount you can put into a cash ISA to £12,000. This encourages people, even those who prefer cash, to maximize the £12,000 in cash and then allocate the remaining £8,000 to stocks and shares if they have the funds. I think this is an excellent system and a very good approach, demonstrating financial discipline as a country and encouraging investment. Another personal highlight was the frequent mention of Leeds as one of the largest investment zones in the UK. They are keeping council tax and rates as low as possible in these zones, with specific reference to the South Bank development. Our entire investment portfolio across West and South Yorkshire is centered around this area, so this is very good news for me and my investors in property there. Who are the rich, who are truly impacted by the mansion tax? It's often your nan living in central London. Outside of the M25, very few people own homes worth £2 million or more. While someone owning a £2 million house outside London is clearly doing very well, it's important to recognize that not everyone owning a valuable property is rich in the traditional sense. There are many council house millionaires who bought flats in Chelsea for £18,000 through a council scheme 30 or 40 years ago, and those properties are now worth £2 million. Imagine telling that pensioner they now need to pay an extra £2,500 a year. I believe the people most impacted by this will, ironically, be some of the poorer individuals in specific circumstances. And even if it does only impact the wealthy, £2,500 is negligible to a multimillionaire, and the £400 million it generates annually is insignificant for a country's budget. So, ultimately, it's your nan in central London, and generally the working class and older generation, who will be hurt the most. What can we expect from all of this? This is the most important takeaway. If you are salaried, earning between £30,000 and £60,000, you are getting squeezed the most. If you are a young worker, you have just become less desirable to employers. The game has become easier for smart investors. I believe the UK remains highly investable, but it's no longer for casual investors. In property, it won't be the accidental landlords making all the money. It will be those with the right structure, leverage, and professional approach who achieve the biggest gains. For those investing in the UK stock market, I don't believe the FTSE 100 will be the most exciting investment vehicle for the next decade. You'll need to be very strategic about which specific shares and companies you invest in. The reality is high taxes, low productivity, and low growth. If I were to describe Britain right now, I'd say it's a safe bet. Solid. The decisions, while not necessarily ones I would have made, are financially sound. It's not exciting like Bitcoin or Dubai, but the UK has 1,000 years of evidence of resilience. We are one of the most resilient countries in the world. I disagree with many of the changes Rachel Reeves and Labour have made, but they are solid financial decisions. In an upcoming video, I'll share what I would have done differently, offering viable solutions rather than just ranting. More than ever, the focus must be on your own economy. My biggest takeaway over the last few years is that you can no longer rely on state pensions or the government to look after you. 50 years of such reliance have created weakness and a claimant mentality in our country. There's a time for socialism and a time for capitalism. In a state that is becoming increasingly socialist and left-wing, Those on the right need to focus more on their individual economies. I'm not here to debate political choices or what's right or humane. I'm simply discussing your personal economics. If you desire financial freedom, you must take control. The good news is that if you are a property investor looking to structure wisely, now is the time to act. We have an 1-8-month window of opportunity to go all in. Here on Property Council, in the coming weeks, I'll be discussing each separate part of this budget, how it impacts you, and more importantly, how you can take advantage of these changes to put more money in your pocket.